Ow!
You're listening to Ahead for Athletics, an original podcast written, recorded, and edited by Claire Valenti. This podcast was created in conjunction with the Blueprint News Network in Downers Grove. According to neurosurgeon Cordy Vans, a neurosurgeon explained sports-related head injury from the American Association of Neurological Surgeons, quote, concussions frequently affect athletes in both contact and non-contact sports, and are considered to be diffuse brain injuries that traumatically induce alterations of mental status, end quote. In high schools across the country, student athletes receive and are at risk of suffering head injuries in the sports that they play. Although each sport and amount of risk differs, student athletes should still be aware of the risks associated with their respective sports, as well as be aware of the safety protocols put in place to help prevent and protect them from concussions. Senior Tanner Sains is an outside hitter on the volleyball team at DGS and plays in a club outside of school. In volleyball, he said there's times when blockers will collide with each other, or times when the ball could hit you on the head when blocking or receiving. Although it's uncommon, Sains said it's never impossible.
If it's clear that you are injured, then the coach will pull you out and then you get sent to the trainer. But other than that, I don't think there's anything too official with how they handle that.
Regarding safety protocols and the risk that comes with being in a sport, Sains feels at ease due to the unlikelihood of concussions in volleyball. With other sports, the return to play protocol is where he feels students and staff need to be more careful.
Usually the injury or the long-term effects from the injury don't come from the initial hit, but it comes from, the player going back in and then getting hit again, which, causes the long-term problems. So I think taking every situation seriously is important because, you never know if somebody could actually be in a bad spot, and you don't want them to get, even more hurt than they already are.
735 high school students died participating in high school sports between 1982 and 2015, with 1/4 of the deaths being linked to head trauma, according to Michael Olive's research report. Protecting student athletes. Are states doing enough to keep student athletes safe from heat and head injuries? Senior Will Schussler is a wrestler for DGS and has been with the program for all 4 years of his high school career. He also plays lacrosse on the varsity team. As these are both contact sports, Schussler is familiar with the safety protocols that are put in place to protect the student athletes at DGS.
We have an 8 to 18 website that we all have to kind of read before. They do a pretty good job explaining it there, but then we also have, concussion protocol. And we actually do testing for that through the athletic trainers. So I think that, depending on what sport you're doing, you have a pretty good idea of the head injuries that could arise. And I think they do a pretty good job, combating it, at least getting you set up in a good spot before you start the sport.
In Dr. Andrew S. McIntosh's Helmets and Head Protection for the Athlete as a Means to Prevent Injury, he describes the risk of head injury varying between different contact, projectile, and high-velocity sports, and that the impact characteristics differ based on the nature and severity of each respective sport's type of risk. Schussler, as a two-sport athlete, makes sure to stay aware of the risks he faces in both wrestling and lacrosse. He feels the safety protocols that are put in place are specifically effective due to communication between the parents, staff, and student athletes.
Both sports I've been in, they do a great job of mitigating the risks. In wrestling, obviously wear a headgear, and a lot of kids can wear a mouth guard if they choose. But, wrestling, there's no helmets, right? So kids aren't going to be using their head to dive in and try and hurt, yes, concussions can happen, but it's usually pretty freak if that does happen. For lacrosse, we do wear helmets. We all wear mouth guards. And then, those rules about, you can't hit people in the head and, certain things similar to football, right? So I think that the rules of the sport, along with, our athletic trainers and our coaches, how they work together to kind of make sure we're safe. I think generally they do a pretty good job, especially at Downers.
In the National Federation of State High School Associations, Concussions in Sports, Past, Present, and Future, by Javier Cardenas, quote, historically, the long-term risks of concussion were unknown, underreported, and sometimes dismissed. Our current understanding of concussion is that there have been and can be long-term consequences for those who suffer multiple, end quote. PE teacher Troy Michaelak has helped coach both football and basketball. As an alumni from DGS, he is able to compare the safety protocols from a few decades ago to the ones that are in place today.
When I was a student here, if there was ever a situation where in football or soccer or any sport, whatever you're in, if there was ever fear of a head injury, it was just kind of one of those things where it was just kind of a general assessment of, hey, how are you feeling? Do you feel good? Do you feel like you got your bell rung, that type of thing? And then it was just kind of a judgment call if there wasn't that series of any signs. So there was not a baseline test in place. So I think, what has really happened over the last number of years with more awareness being put towards head injuries and trauma and CTE and different things like that, I think it's very beneficial for the student, and it has the best interest in them and their health for not only current but for the future.
As a coach for 2 different sports, Michaelak has gotten to know many different athletes over the years. From his perspective, it's a student athlete's choice to participate in their respective sports, knowing the risks that come with playing.
I think there's definitely some athletes who, no matter what, want to be out there, and if they get if they get a head injury or something, they're still going to want to be, just sheer competitiveness may drive some to want to be out sooner than they should, especially if it's a bigger game, a more important game, a playoff game, or they're fighting for a scholarship or something like that. And then I think there are some athletes who, definitely care about their health more than others, or they might not be as much of a risk taker when it comes to, getting out there too soon. So I think it really depends on the athlete.
Music used in Ahead for Athletics came from royalty-free music website freesound.org. The podcast was written and edited by Claire Valenti. A special thanks to Will Schessler, Tanner Sains, and Troy Michaelak for interviewing. Finally, this podcast was created in conjunction with the Blueprint News Network. Thank you for listening.